Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
Live from Las Vegas, it's time for you to be talking movies with America's most award-winning film critic, John Barbour.
You're being so gentle. I've heard you give reviews and you're so rough. You're saying.
How would you have evaluated your own work in some of the films that you did prior to The Longest Shot? I mean,
much better than you, my friend.
Our next guest is one of those rare talents who has something to say and can say it funny. He's a writer-performer on the new Laugh-In and one of the most popular, outspoken, and entertaining personalities on the local news here in Los Angeles. He's won a half a dozen Emmys as a film critic and host of his own shows. Let's welcome Mr. John Barbour, right over there.
Hi there, this is John Barbour, and welcome to lucky show number 13 of Talking Movies. You're about to meet tonight one of the most interesting and most fascinating people I have ever met in Hollywood. Now, as you can tell by this wall behind me, that I've known and been around and worked with all of the major stars in town. They were not nearly as interesting as the man that you're about to meet very, very soon. And the man that I want to meet right now is our engineer and director, my cohort, Doug Newsom. Doug, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Hi, John.
Well, I hope you're as excited about this show as I am. I mean, I loved doing the two great speeches shows that we did. And today we're going to conclude it because I've had scores and scores of emails from around the world that's saying, John, you've forgotten two of the best, greatest speeches ever in movies. And we're going to start the show with those. And you can also see that I am wearing a suit, which means I have a guest. And I'm telling you, he is absolutely fantastic. But first, I have to talk a little bit about the first great speech that you were going to see. In the 50s, when I went to Los Angeles at 17 and it was all illegal, I still wanted to be an actor, as I told you earlier. I went to night school because that's where I first saw Jack Nicholson, and that's where Natalie Wood went. And people used to say to me, hey, if you want to be an actor, you got to go over to the silent film theater on Fairfax and watch some of the silents, Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin. And I said, listen, I don't want to talk. That's not real life. I don't want to look at movies where people don't talk. So I never went. That was in the 50s, during the absolute height of the horrible blacklisting that was going on in this country. Depressed by that and in desperate need to find out why my father deserted our family, I went to England in search of him. I ended up at a place called the Castle Theater in Farnham, Surrey, where I got to be an actor for almost a year, a different play every 2 weeks. And I absolutely adored it. The meeting with my father never worked out, so thank God I had a job to fall back on. I stayed in a boarding house, and the lovely landlady took care of me so well. And then one day she said to me, Johnny, you want to be an actor? Why aren't you seeing Charlie Chaplin? And I said, you know, people used to tell me that in Hollywood, and I have no interest in that because that's not real life. They don't speak in those movies. And she said to me, John, do you want to know something? And I said, what? Art speaks much louder than words. An unknown landlady saying something this brilliant. I gave her a big hug and I said, well, just for you, I'll go see the first Gold Rush. She said at Piccadilly Movie Theater on Piccadilly Square, they were having a 5-day festival of Charlie Chaplin. So I went Monday morning. The first film was The Gold Rush. I was there till the theater closed. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every morning when it opened till they closed. I cannot tell you the number of times I applauded loudly, laughed loudly. I wanted to stand up and cheer. I could not believe the genius of this man. Charlie Chaplin was by far the greatest genius to ever work in front of or behind a camera. And he had greater crowds gathering to see him than the Beatles ever had. However, he was forbidden now to show his movies in the United States. Now, he lived in the country for 40 years, but the kid was an orphan Jew. He didn't think he belonged anywhere, so he never felt a citizen of anywhere, just a citizen of the world. He was married and devoted to his job. Well, of course, J. Edgar Hoover and the powers that be, the Nazified America, you know, that Project Paperclip brought 5,000 convicted Nazis to the United States after the Second World War. And they all wanted Charlie Chaplin cut out of the country. So they never allowed him to return in 1952. That's why, and his films were never allowed to be shown. Now, guess what happened? He was the greatest silent star ever. But when he found a voice, it was in The Great Dictator. 1 year before the United States even thought of getting into the Second World War to stop Hitler or Mussolini or any fascist, Franco in Spain, Charlie Chaplin made The Great Dictator. I have scores and scores of emails from around the world saying, shame on you, John, if you do not show that. And in this speech, much more valuable and important and topical today is probably what these friends of mine say is true and what the critics say is true, the greatest speech ever in American movies. So, Doug, would you please play The Great Dictator speech from Charlie Chaplin, made in 1940?
I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people, and so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
Do you notice that twice he said, in the name of democracy? And it was this democracy that did not want this man's voice to be heard. And the same thing happened with another Englishman, John Lennon. Nixon did not want his voice heard in this country. They tried hard to deport him, but he succeeded in staying, thank God. And it would not surprise me in the least if the CIA or the powers that be had also offed John Lennon. Now to the speech that brought me to America when I was a 16-year-old boy. It was 1939, the year that Hollywood made some of its greatest movies. This movie was a movie by Frank Capra, written by Sidney Buckman, and it was starring a young Jimmy Stewart. It is the movie that made Jimmy Stewart a star, and surprisingly, thankfully in America, it was based on a true story, which made it all the more powerful. He plays a young politician, a senator or congressman, and he's filibustering to bring down a corrupt politician. And that corrupt politician is brilliantly played by Claude Rains. This is a speech that made me want to come to this country. So, Doug, would you please play Jimmy Stewart's speech written by Sidney Buckman from Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Get up there with that lady that's up on top of this Capitol dome, that lady that stands for liberty. Take a look at this country through her eyes if you really want to see something. And you won't just see scenery. You'll see the whole parade of what man's carved out for himself after centuries of fighting. And fighting for something better than just jungle. So he can stand on his own 2 feet, free and decent, like he was created, no matter what his race, color, or creed. That's what you see. There's no place out there for graft, or greed, or lies, or compromise with human liberties. And if that's what the grown-ups have done with this world that was given to them, then we better get those boys' camps started fast and see what the kids can do. And it's not too late, because this country is bigger than the Taylors, or you, or me, or anything else. Great principles don't get lost once they come to light. They're right here. You just have to see them again. I guess this is just another lost cause, Mr. Payne. All you people don't know about lost causes. Mr. Payne does. He said once they were the only causes worth fighting for. And he fought for them once. For the only reason any man ever fights for them. Because of just one plain simple rule. Love thy neighbor. And in this world today full of hatred, a man who knows that one rule has a great trust. You know that rule, Mr. Payne. And I loved you for it just as my father did. And you know that you fight for the lost causes harder than for any others. Yes, you even die for them. Like a man we both knew, Mr. Payne. You think I'm licked? You all think I'm licked. Well, I'm not licked. And I'm going to stay right here and fight for this lost cause, even if this room gets filled with lies like these. and the tailors and all their armies come marching into this place, somebody will listen to me.
He's okay, just fainted.
I am so glad they played the end of that clip, because the astonishing thing, first of all, when this movie was released, it did not get good critical reviews, but the audience absolutely loved it. And it was the movie and the speech that made Jimmy Stewart a major star. And you saw Claude Rains, that brilliant, brilliant villain. Well, it was Claude Rains, if he had kept his mouth shut, would have gotten away with continuing to be as corrupt as he is, and as corrupt as anybody that we have in Washington right now. But it ended up like a bad Perry Mason TV show, with Claude Rains jumping up and saying, "Oh, I'm guilty, I'm guilty, I'm guilty, I'm terrible." But that is the speech that brought me to America, the America that I absolutely love and still do. Anyway, I want to get now to one of the most interesting people I have ever met in my life. And of course, I met him in pursuing my career in Hollywood. And as I said earlier, you know, I was Sinatra's private writer for 4.5 years. Red Fox was my mentor as a comic and a lifelong friend. I knew them all and hung around them all, and they were all interesting indeed. But this man, whom I love, is one of the most interesting ever. Now, you've probably never heard of him. Nobody has ever heard of him except everybody who means something in Hollywood, because he is by far the most successful, the most prominent, and the most interesting publicist in the business. And he has worked with and helped almost every major star. And I adore him. His name is Harlan Ball. Harlan, how are you today?
I'm doing good. What a buildup.
Oh, well, listen, I got to tell you, first of all, looking at your office, I feel inferior. You got more trophies and pictures of stars there than I do. So shame on me and good for you. But your thoughts on those two speeches that you just saw. Now, you may remember seeing the Chaplin speech. I never got to see it until just recently. And of course, you must remember the Jimmy Stewart speech.
Well, as you know, I didn't know what you were going to be showing beforehand, and you could not have chosen two more meaningful speeches to me. I don't know if you know, but I was Chaplin's publicist.
You were?
After
you gotta be kidding.
After his passing, they released a series of DVDs and sounds, and I used to work with Dustin Hoffman and the silent movie airings at the Royal Theater, at the Royce Hall Theater.
Oh, so my gosh.
Every year we would do with the LA Phil, we would do a screening of some great movie.
Hold it, I just got to tell you something. You know, this happens every time I meet you. I mean, I've heard hundreds of your stories, and every time we sit down, you pop up with something new. You were Charlie Chaplin's publicist after he died. Did you deal at all with Una O'Neill, his wife?
No, I dealt with Michael.
Really?
Yeah, it was funny. I would start working on these things, and I started putting out press releases with Susan for Harold Lloyd and for Charlie Chaplin. And Army Archer, who we miss, called me out of the blue and said, "Harlan, is it possible your clients are getting older?" Considering I've been with George Burns and Bob Hope and Roy Rogers and all of those, he went, "How can your clients be getting older?"
Oh my gosh! Well, what?
But yeah, no, I that's his speech and just what he went through, because I worked, Tippi Hedren's a client, and she's the only woman to have worked with both Hitchcock and Charlie Chaplin.
Oh my gosh, you're kidding. When did she work with Charlie?
She did Countess of Hong Kong with Marlon Brando and Sophia Loren.
Yes, that was when
She played Marlon's wife. Yeah.
Yes, that's when Marlon proved he couldn't do comedy. In spite of your help.
Yeah, she said that Charlie drove him crazy because Charlie would give you line readings, would literally, where Hitchcock would leave you alone.
Right.
And he would tell you if you're doing it wrong, otherwise he wouldn't talk to you. Whereas Charlie Chaplin would literally come on and do the whole thing for you, and it drove Marlon insane.
Oh my! Well, it's interesting because when I was doing the research on Chaplin, there was an actress. She was elderly now, but she had been the girl, I think, in Limelight, and Charlie was blind or something.
Yeah.
She said he spent 3 days giving her line readings and reshooting 100 times. It drove people nuts. But look at the end result.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tippi said that she tried to introduce Hitchcock and Chaplin together at one point because they were both in the UK at the moment. And she invited them both to dinner. And Hitchcock apparently said, "Why would I want to do that?"
Oh my goodness gracious!
So it never happened. But didn't Chaplin get an Academy, at least an Academy nomination for the musical score for Limelight in 1973?
Yeah, he got the nomination, and then of course he got
well, he got the Lifetime was 1972.
Yeah, that's right. So it was so well deserved. But but that's America. Shame on America. It's like the same. I mentioned this the other day about Muhammad Ali. I mean, everybody thinks that Muhammad is one of the greatest sports heroes or American heroes ever in history. But in 1970, they wanted him dead.
Yeah, you can't see it. Right above me is the last piece he signed on the wall above me, because he was a client. And right above me.
Hold on.
Look
Tell
up.
me about Ali. Tell me.
You can see there, he signed that piece for me in the card.
Oh my gosh, my gosh. Well, when I introduced him, he had come to town because he wanted to do my show, because he wanted to speak up against the Vietnam War. Right. And I was one person other than Howard Cosell. Howard would give him 5 minutes. I was going to give him an hour and a half. God, and he was so wonderful. So when he came on the show, since he was a guy that would always do these little couplets about fighting and rhyme, he'd do it in rhyme about his talents, and I was going to knock somebody sky high. So I introduced, he came to do Flip Wilson's show the next day. So when I introduced him with a funny poem, and he loved it, and that's what they used on the Flip Wilson show.
Oh, perfect.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it drives me crazy that they gave Muhammad such a hard time and they gave Charlie such a hard time. They took his star away from the Walk of Fame for a while.
Yes, I know.
I mean, it's insane. And then I see it today because they're beginning to do the same thing to other stars in the past, remove their honors because of PC or cancel culture and things like that. They're going to hate themselves later for it.
Okay, first, you have you have a great, interesting life, and your client list and the story's endless, but I want to hear a little bit about your story because you still are so young. I mean, you look terrific right now. Where were you born? What were your parents like? And did early movies have any influence on what you would do in your later life? Tell me.
Well, first of all, I think Dick Clark gave me some good tips on staying young.
No, he was a creamy, crispy donut muncher, so it wasn't that.
Okay. Oh, good grief. I was born in Colorado, Denver. Moved around a lot. My father worked for a company that originally was called Kregsky and then called Kmart during their growth spurt. So my father's job was to go around to every city and open the new Kmart in whatever city it was in. So every 6 months I was moving someplace new. I can't say that movies, even TV, you know, good Quaker boy. We weren't allowed a lot of TV, and
Wow.
and movies were. The movies we were allowed were the Disney movies, like That Darn Cat and things like that. I don't know that they played a huge part in my industry background.
Well, when you were a kid, what did you think you wanted to be? What did you aspire to, maybe?
I wanted to be, at one point, a forest ranger.
Really?
And I think I would have headed that way had it not been for, oddly enough, I had been doing theater, you know, the high school theater and things like that, and got involved with, I was with a group called Singers, and I toured and sang with them, and I auditioned for a little group called Up With People. Do you remember them?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And folks should know, you sing absolutely beautifully. You're sort of a lesser Robert Goulet, okay? And you sing quite often in church, which is terrific.
Church and Vitello's and Catalinas, whenever Eileen Graff or others asked me.
So how on earth did you ever gravitate toward this business?
I started singing in church young, and they would do shows, The Prodigal Son and things like that, and I got into those programs. I won at church, I won a gong show competition. This is actually the start. I wish I had a picture. I have a picture, but I wish I would have had to share it with you. I actually got wheeled out in a round old tub and had a cap on my head, and I sang Rubber Ducky. And I took first prize.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
So that was my introduction into entertainment, was Rubber Ducky in a tub for a pie social at my church. And then I started.
But you know, I think some of the people you met as a youngster, or maybe even the teacher, and I'm thinking primarily of Blackwell, who became a sort of your mentor or good friend or whatever. Wasn't he in the dress designing business?
Oh yeah, but I didn't meet Blackwell until much later. I actually I went to an audition with a friend who was auditioning for a little show called Oliver.
Oh my gosh.
And I wasn't planning on auditioning. I sat in the back waiting for him to finish, and it was in Colorado, and his mother had dropped us off. And the director, Ken Foster, saw me sitting in the back and came back and said, "I'm sorry, you either have to audition or you have to go. You can't just watch." So I thought, well, fine, it's snowing outside, it's freezing. I'm not going to wait for his mother. And I danced, I sang, and I acted, and I got cast, and he didn't.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's the same director. He cast me years later. He didn't cast me as Oliver, but I was one of Fagan's gang.
Oh my God, how terrific.
Yeah. And years later, he gave me my first theatrical. I play in David and Lisa.
Really?
Yeah, David and Lisa. I wasn't David or Lisa. I was rapist. Not even rapist number one.
Oh my God. David and Lisa. David and Lisa, was that a play as well as a film?
Oh yeah.
I saw the film.
Yeah, it was a play.
Oh, did you appear in the film?
No, I was far too young for that.
Really?
Yeah, I appeared in the stage production. I played rapist number 2. I always thought, what kind of impression did I leave him with, that he hired me as a pickpocket and then hired me as a rapist?
Well, you know,
which of course immediately my first big professional production, I was a Nazi.
And what was that?
Sound of Music. I played Rolf.
Oh, you did? Where? Yeah. On Broadway?
No, that was a Equity House Theater.
Oh my gosh almighty. Well, you know, as a critic, to me, the greatest shows that I enjoyed the most were one-person shows. Josephine Baker in her 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Went to the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion. I wrote a love letter to her on the air as a critic, and she sent me a dozen roses. And oh my God. But the show that I saw 3 times, standing room only, and I stood and applauded at the end, was Hal Holbrook as Mark Twain Tonight.
Yes.
Ever since I have known you, for the years that I've known you and watched you perform and sing and tell stories, I've been bashing you, as your friends have, to do a one-person show, and you're still not doing it. So I hope you do it. So
it's funny you're saying that, because Hal was one of my champions asking me to do that.
Really?
Yeah, I did a show, I did a charity performance, and they asked me if I would read the charity information at intermission. And when they brought up the lights, I had already performed. And when they brought up the lights, I saw Mr. Hal Holbrook sitting in the front row. And I went, "Oh, hello, Mr. How are you?" He said, "Fine." I said, and I looked off, I said, "That's not intimidating at all." And I started reading, and I said, you know, if they had told me Mark Twain was sitting in the front row, I would have memorized this.
Oh, how sweet.
And afterwards, he did some interviews, and twice he mentioned me in his interviews. He was a huge champion of mine, and I just adored him. And
so how on earth? I mean, you should have gone further as a performer with the talent and the personality that you have, and you're a good-looking fellow. How come you ended up being a publicist and making other people famous? And who was your first client, and how did you get into that business?
God chose the direction. Honestly, my agent.
Hold it a second. Why did you say God chose your direction?
I think God opened doors for me in the direction I wound up going. In
what way?
Well, at Paramount, he opened doors to start assisting stars. I was one of the last contract assistants. I was assigned to Tom Cruise on Top Gun. I was assigned to different artists. And I think my agent I got work everywhere on theater, every time. I booked everything in theater, but I couldn't book TV and film at all. But I was terrified of New York, and every offer I had in New York, I turned down. And this is the late 70s, early 80s.
Wow.
So it was a little more frightening back then. Today, I own New York. I have no qualms at all. You know, with Angela Lansbury and Carol Channing and all the others, Tommy Tune, New York's mine. But then I was terrified of it and wouldn't go that direction. And that's where, would have been my work. I started at Elitch Garden Summer Stock Theater. I went to the Academy of Dramatic Arts first. And then I went to work at the Elitch Garden Summer Stock Theater, which is where Mary Pickford was. George C. Scott started there. Antoinette Perry, of course, the Tony Awards named after her is where that started. She started there. I had a great pedigree. And first show that came in, I was actually not hired to be in the show. I was hired to be an usher.
Oh my.
And the first day of the show, the first star came in, I got a call from Chris Kirkland, the producer of the show. It was 84 Charing Cross Road. And I got a phone call saying they had lost the driver for the first star. And only because my name was Boll, I was the first one on the list. I had a car, better hours, better pay. Would I be her driver? And I said, sure. So I became Shelley Winter's driver.
Oh my gosh.
And eventually Helen, her assistant, left, and I knew her schedule, and she loved having an attractive young man on her arm when she went places. So I became the assistant, and she gave me to Tammy Grimes, who gave me to Maureen O'Sullivan, who gave me to Gabe Chaplin, who gave me to Richard Kiley, who gave me to Rex Harrison, who gave me to Cloris Leachman.
Oh my gosh. Now speaking of Rex Harrison, did he become a client? What did you do for Rex?
Oh no, Rex was in a show that I was working on. I wound up working with Noel, his son, on a show called Housekeeper with opposite Cloris Leachman. So one thing just led to the other. Each person passed me on when they had a show or when they didn't need me because they weren't working. I was passed on to another artist.
Well, there comes a time. Now you have to realize that you seem to be doing more for artists than you yourself. So it's time for you to incorporate and start getting a list of clients. When did you incorporate, and who was your first major client, and which one of your earliest clients had the most impact on you and you found the most interesting?
I think the first one to have the most impact on me was Cloris Leachman. She wanted me to pursue performing. She made me go through scripts with her, recite lines while she was in the tub. I saw her in the nude more times than anyone can imagine. She worked with me, taught me how things go in circles, that funny things happen in threes. She was playing a homeless woman in Housekeeper, and she made me follow homeless women through Denver to mark down what they were doing. And she would do the same thing. So it wasn't just me going out. She followed some, and then we'd compare notes, and then we'd incorporate it into the script or into activities like sponge bathing herself in the middle of a street. She taught me how to really find the guts and how to break something down. So that would be the first one. I think when I came out here, going to work for Mrs. Carson and Bob and Dolores Hope would probably be the next level of, at one point I was working for 3 women. I was working for Joanne Carson, Lindsay Wagner, and Valerie Harper at the same time.
Wow.
And
now when you're working for these stars, how do you determine how much they are supposed to pay you?
I basically took what they offered.
And were they generous?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay, now Bob and Dolores Hope. Oh, I hope you see it. I know you read my book, and thankfully, because you were the publicist in LA for my book, and that's why I did so well in LA. But I have the most wonderful story about Bob Hope. And then if you go to my site, www.johnbarbersworld, Bob Hope gave up a Christmas performance with the troops to come and do my show on Channel 13 Live. You must watch it. I absolutely told. I started out criticizing him. When I reviewed him, I said, you know, if you work for General Motors or AT&T or anything like that and you're over 65, you have to retire. Maybe the same should hold true for Bob Hope. So anyway, he called to get me fired and ended up being a close friend. So tell me a little bit about Bob and then Dolores, who was so sweet.
Oh yeah, I worked under a man named Ward Grant first. He was Bob's publicist. And I worked between he and Dale Olson. They were my 2 mentors in PR. Dale handled Rock Hudson, Marilyn Monroe, tons of others, Shirley MacLaine. Ward handled Bob. And I wound up working under Ward Grant for several years before Bob passed. And then Ward died, and I took over all the PR for the Hope family. I still handle Linda Hope and the Hope family, the legacy.
Now, 2 quick questions. Why would a star as magnificently well-known as Bob Hope need a publicist, and why would his daughter Linda need a publicist?
Well, with Bob, there was always some new appearance, some show coming up, something we had to promote. Heaven knows how many books did he do, and I promoted 3 of them. He had books that were out, and that became my specialty for him. Dear Prez, I Want to Tell You was one of the big ones. Dolores was the real, in all honesty, the heart, she did the charity, she ran that household. She not plus being talented, she could sing. So that's how they met. She was a singer. I work for Linda because the Bob Hope legacy has continued.
Obviously.
I mean, and the foundation, the Bob and Dolores Hope Foundation, continues to help children, women of domestic violence, and veterans. It's a constant, and we've got the book out now, Dear Bob, which is letters and correspondence that he had with veterans of soldiers, nurses, people who were in World War II.
Is it out now?
It's out now. It's called Dear Bob.
Can I get a copy?
Yes.
Oh, please send me a copy.
Yeah, no,
I'll read some of it on the air.
Oh yeah, no, Linda and a woman named Martha Bolton, who was Bob's writer for 15 years, put it together. First female writer, and she was first staff female writer. She was with him for 15 years. They did the book together, and he collected everything. He was at one point getting 37 to 38,000 letters a week.
Oh my goodness!
From people in the military.
Oh, goodness.
It was, and he and Mrs. Hughes, who was his assistant at the time, responded to absolutely everything. One of the things that amazed me the most is when he was traveling, people would say, because correspondence back then was nowhere near what it is today. And they knew that he'd be back in the States long before they were, or able to write. And they would write their number, a phone number down. This is my wife, this is my girlfriend, this is my mother, or whatever. And he called every one of them.
Oh my gosh, how terrific.
To say, I was with your son, I was with your daughter who was a nurse or whatever. And they wanted me to. He would follow up on every one of them. And one of the greatest legacies this man left us is when I went to book signings with him, or I went to events with him, the people in line weren't necessarily the people who saw him or met him at USO shows or in the past. They were the children, the grandchildren of the father or the mother, or whoever who had been there when Bob was there, because they kept every correspondence. I was always surprised to see these people who would bring in letters they got from Bob Hope in frames.
Did he ever tell you what his favorite movie was, or his favorite actor or favorite actress was?
I don't think he could. I don't think he favorite. I mean, of course, he loved working with Bing, and he loved working with Dorothy.
To me, his very best movie was the one he did with Lucille Ball.
Oh, he loved her. Loved her.
God, what a really good movie. And he turned out to be a really good actor. Now, to you, who was the most independent and the most unusual female artist you worked to? I know, listen, I know you and Angela Lansbury are the closest of friends. And I saw her in her very, very first picture. I believe it was the picture of Dorian Gray.
I have to trust you on that. I'm thinking Gaslight's the first one I became familiar with.
No, the picture.
Oh, I know there was more before that, but that became the one I
Yes, it was a picture of Dorian Gray. George Sanders was in that film. And throughout her entire career, she evidenced a versatility and talent seen by very few actresses. I mean, she could do
anything.
So was she one of the most interesting, or name somebody else?
No, she's right up there. It's hard for me to say who is more interesting than others. Angie is always kinder to me than I possibly deserve. She has been a cheerleader of mine when I was in DC, when my client Jerry Herman was receiving the Kennedy Center. She kept giving me credit for things I didn't deserve credit for. She's one of the 9 ladies, my clients of mine, that I arranged to have their items from their careers inducted into the Smithsonian.
Oh my goodness!
There was Angela, Phyllis Diller, Esther Williams, Rose Marie, Carol Channing, June Lockhart, Tippi Hedren, Florence Henderson, and Julie Newmar. I had them all on stage, and we had them. There were items from their careers that were going to the Smithsonian, and which is kind of funny because one of the things I told you about Cloris, seeing her in the nude all the time. One of the comments that was made, a woman from Associated Press asked them all when we opened it up to questions. They said, "Other than the obvious, do you all have anything else in common?" And Esther Williams, for whatever reason, decided to go, "Yeah, our publicist Harlan Ball has seen us all naked."
Oh my God, that's hilarious.
And the humor was not in that she said it, but that every woman on stage went, yeah. So, yeah.
Oh my God, oh my. What did Phyllis Diller contribute? I loved Phyllis when I was in LA, and I had a half a dozen shows, but every time I got a show, I tried to have her on. So she was on with me twice. And I absolutely loved her. And I first loved her when Jack Parr had her on, this young middle-aged woman who is a concert pianist.
Yeah.
Gives it all up. What did she contribute to the Smithsonian?
She contributed her joke file.
Really?
Which was 2 large filing cabinets with a little, like you get card indexes at a library. And they had jokes on them, and they were filed according to subject matter or, different things. So that was what she gave in. Phyllis was one of those. I inherited her through Bob and Dolores.
Really?
And she was wonderful to me. She threw a birthday party for me towards the end of her life. I have so much of her artwork throughout my house because she was also an artist. And she was so funny. the party, I showed up early to see if I could help set up, because I figured it was a lot of work, and she had hired waiters and, you know, served the champagne and everything else. And I walked in the kitchen. There she was helping put the hors d'oeuvres together. And I teased her. I said, I'm going to go upstairs and steal one of your wigs because I want it as a souvenir. And she said, oh, do you want one of those? I said, yes. She said, here, take this one, and threw it at me.
Oh my God, that's funny.
I still have it.
Listen, you speak of her artwork. Having seen your place, you could charge admission to see your house because you have unbelievable artifacts. And you must have half of Bob Hope's stuff.
I've got his golf club that he used in his, when he passed away, the family came in and got what they wanted to remember him by. And then the staff was called in and we got what we wanted. And I got his USO jacket and his trunk, his traveling trunks that he had on board the Queen Mary.
My God.
I have his, the Queen Mary has been begging me for it.
Those trunks must be worth a fortune.
Well, I've got one. Yeah. I don't know what it's worth. Someone told me that the trunk itself, without being Bob's, is somewhere around 25 grand right now.
Oh my goodness.
So I have no idea the fact, and it's got his initials on it. It's embroidered, you know, and I use it to put Bob's stuff in. I have a lot of his stuff. So the trunk is actually full of Bob's stuff.
Wow. Now, for the men, which one of, and you've represented half of them, which one of them did you find the most interesting or the most unusual? I hate to ask you these questions because they're probably still alive and waiting. If that son of a bitch says somebody else, I'm going to fire him.
The men are all gone right now. Gregory Peck, John Forsythe, to Rip Taylor was always kept me laughing. It's real. Mr. Blackwell, of course, I got very involved in his life, and in fact, working on a new book about him right now, and a new film about him right now.
They're making a movie about him?
I'm working with a wonderful producer who was nominated for a film called Ferdinand for Academy Award. She's now working with me on a new film. We want to call it The List. It's a TV movie film, TV movie. But it's about his life, and because he contributed so much that people don't realize. Other than the best dressed, best and worst dressed, he was the first one. He had done so much more that people don't realize.
I think I read somewhere a long time ago that when he passed, I think it was the first time that I saw your name in print or something.
Possibly.
That he so admired you, he left you a lot.
He left me all intellectual properties to his life. I have several dresses. I have his books. I have his lists. I have everything. I have his artwork. And of course, he left me money too. But one of the things he asked of me was to make sure people didn't forget who he was, forget him. And I've done everything I can to keep his legend and his name alive. So.
And this movie is going to be called The List. And why is it called The List?
Well, because most people will recognize him from The List, but it goes much further, because you were talking about, you just said her name a moment ago, her one woman show that you love so much.
Oh, Josephine Baker.
Josephine Baker. Yeah. He had her at the house. He adored her. He worked with a lot of individuals. He just had an incredible life. He was one of the original Dead End Kids on Broadway.
Was he really?
Yeah, he only showed for one night on Broadway. And the reason for that, they took him off the streets. He was hustling. He was a kid hustling on the streets. And they took him to put him in the show so that they could send him on tour, so that they could legitimately say direct from Broadway. So he was only in one Broadway show then. He later would be with Mae West and others, and Gypsy Rose Lee. He's the only man who was allowed on stage when she stripped. And but he worked with Mae West. He worked with several others. He was a young star. He was in the movie Dead End Kids. And then he worked with
Now, the Dead End Kids, was Leo Gorcey and Hunts Hall, or different Dead End Kids? Do you remember?
No, the first one.
Oh my goodness, how amazing is that?
And he was in juvenile court with Rita Hayworth as a kid. He worked with Humphrey Bogart, Gene Kelly, several others. He worked under the name Dick Ellis. And then as time went on, he used to call himself, and it's sad, he was the casting couch
Why would he say that?
Because they took advantage of him. He was the one they called in when they wanted a quick romp on the sofa.
Hold on. Is that because he was a really handsome young man?
He was a very attractive young man, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And he came from a background, his way of surviving the streets, because his father used to abuse him horribly. He wound up living on the streets, and he turned tricks to stay alive. And so it was
God almighty. Now listen here. You came from a different background.
Oh yeah.
His fabulous publicist. He came from the streets, and wasn't he known as one of the best designers of women's clothing in America?
He handled a lot of celebrities. He did Jane Mansfield, Jane Russell. He did a number of women. He was known for handling the buxom, a lot of the buxom women, with the exception of maybe Nancy Reagan. She wasn't exactly buxom. But he worked with Ann Blythe. He worked with just a host of others, designed for them. I have photos of him working with Goldie Hawn, with Michelle Lee, with a host of others. And he was also the first designer to introduce ethnics, Asian, Black women, in his fashion shows.
Oh, good for him.
Yeah, he was also the very first one to introduce plus sizes women to his fashion shows. They weren't all the typical sticks. He would make two women would come out side by side, one plus size and one.
Harlan, listen, I'm telling you, if it's done right, that is one fabulous story.
Oh yeah. And he was also one of the first people to basically, when he and his partner Spencer got together, the industry treated him like he was a leper, because he had dated Tyrone Power Jr. And the studios came in and said, hell no, we're not going to have you destroy what we put a lot of money into, and broke them up.
Oh, you said Tyrone Power Jr. You mean there's a son, or is this Tyrone Power?
Tyrone Power. But there's Tyrone Power. He was Tyrone Power. And then there's Tyrone Power Jr., who's I've also worked with. He was a wonderful guy. Tyrone Power, the main, the one everyone thinks of.
The Major Handsome movie.
The Major Handsome, right. Sorry, I said Junior because I worked in shows with Junior. Tyrone Power, he dated Tyrone Power. And then when they broke him up, he stayed with Randolph Scott and Cary Grant for a while.
Oh my God.
And then the studios just gave him such a hard time that he had to get into other fields. And he started designing clothes for women he represented as an agent. Oh. And the dumb thing is, eventually the women he was handling, singing in studios, in cabarets, and even for Perron, weren't getting as much press as the costumes he was making.
Oh God, you mentioned Randolph Scott and Cary Grant. In my book, which you obviously read, Your Mother's Not a Virgin, is a really adorable story about how he stopped his Cadillac next to me when I was 17 and tried to pick me up, which is funny. But here's a great Randolph Scott story. Randolph Scott was a golfer, and the Los Angeles Country Club was very, very restrictive, as you probably know then, really restrictive. And he told them that he was an oil magnate because he was wealthy and he could fake some documents and stuff like that. So he got to join the Los Angeles Country Club. But after a year and a half, of course, they researched everybody. They find out the son of a bitch is an actor. So they call him in and they tell him that he's an actor. And he says, no, I'm not. And I got 78 movies to prove it. So now you mentioned earlier, George C. Scott. I always loved Scott. Of course, in Patton, he's in Patty Chayefsky's Hospital. He's magnificent with a lot of great movies. And oh my God, the Dr. Strangelove. Oh my God, he was so, so good. But you knew him. What was he like?
No, George C. Scott?
Yeah.
No, I didn't know him.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, I didn't know him.
Oh,
he was in a theater where he started his career in the same theater I began mine.
Oh, I see.
I actually never got to work with him. I would love to have worked with him.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I knew him. All my stories about him or thoughts of him come from actually Bob Hope, who knew him.
Did you meet Gregory Peck?
Oh, I handled Gregory PR for the Library Foundation. All the books.
Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh yeah, I have a signed first edition.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she signed I have a signed first edition from her.
Oh my gosh, I must say, that was his very, very best performance ever.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
Good actor, but that was.
He was a genuinely wonderful man. It was so funny. We did a tribute to him one year at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel, and Jack Lemmon was there, Angelica Houston, Sally Field, a host of others, all there. And I'll get into another story that probably has nothing to do with this, but everyone decided they wanted to sing a song for him that night. So I found a room upstairs that had a piano, like a mini ballroom of some sort, and they all went upstairs, and everyone's rehearsing and going over the music. And I noticed a man standing in the corner, and I thought, okay, I don't know him, so I should probably find out why he's here, because he's not singing. And I walked over and said, "Can I help you?" He said, "I'm Norman. I'm here with Angie Dickinson." And I said, "Oh, okay, well, fine." And I said, "I'm Harlan." And he said, Harlan Ball?" And I said, "Yeah." My ego started growing. It's like, "Oh, he knows my name." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, yeah, Judy Davidson, Gordon Davidson, Tony Award-winning director's wife, apparently had told him about me and that I was a great writer and everything I was doing." And I said, "Oh." And so I started talking about writing and what I was trying to do. And I had a couple of books out, and I was trying to get another project up and running, and how hard it was, and putting everything together. And out of the blue, Judy Davidson walked into the room, saw us standing in the corner, walked over and said, "Oh, good, I'm so glad you two met. You know, Mr. Lear's been a friend of our family for years." And I went, "Lear, Norman Lear."
Oh, isn't that?
He wasn't wearing his hat. I didn't recognize him. And I said, "You really don't need to know what it's like to be a writer, do you?" He said, "No, but you seem to enjoy telling me about it so much."
Oh, God. Harlan, you've got to send me Bob Hope's book.
Okay.
You must tell me that you're going to come back again, because we're going to tell a whole lot more stories. Would you like to tell us one last goodbye story?
Actually, I would, because it goes right back to Jimmy Stewart and what you started with. I adored the man, and I adored Gloria. And I worked on 3 productions, All About Eve at the Amundsen Theater with all-star cast, Stockard Channing, Angela Lansbury, Kirk Douglas, Jennifer Tilly, Tim Curry. It was a great show. Then we followed it up with Sunset Boulevard with Angelica Houston, Sir Ben Kingsley at the Pantages, and then did Casablanca. But we unfortunately never made it to the 4th year. We took a great film and put it on stage with an all-star cast. And my one that I wanted so badly to do was Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Oh my.
And I wanted to reverse the roles, and I wanted to go to Jodie Foster and ask her to play Mr. Smith, only make it Mrs. Smith. And I called Tippi Hedren, and I wanted her to do the senator, kind of reverse all the roles and bring it into a modern day. It never happened, but that if I have a dream, I would love to bring that
back.
My
God, what a great idea. Well, no wonder you're so successful, because you're so imaginative. And
you can see here's All About Eve, and right over here is Sunset Boulevard. So.
Oh my God, bless you, and thank you so much for being here and being one of my dearest friends. I can't wait to get to LA and take you to Musso Frank's again and listen to more stories. Anyway, thank you all so much. Doug, thank you so much for your help, and thank you all for watching. And in 2 weeks, another fantastic Talking Movies. Till then, good luck.